Hi, Year 5, Miss Price here. So this week for your reading, you are looking at the text The Whale Who Saved Us by Nicola Davies. And I'm just going to go through a few questions, focusing on a variety of strands. As this is our last pack, we just need to make sure that we're secure on answering lots of different types of questions by looking at the marks available for them. So we've got a part of our text on the left-hand side here, and I'm just going to have a quick glance at my questions so that I know when I read the text what I'm looking out for. So our first question says, what does "she felt a thrill pass along her arm" suggest about the character's emotion? So I know I'm looking for that phrase there, "she felt a thrill pass along her arm." And then the second question says, clarify the phrase "his voice was swallowed up in the space between them." So I know I'm looking for two phrases. So as I'm reading, if I hear one of those, I'm going to stop and I'm going to see if I can answer the question. How would it feel to be so close to one out on the ocean? She felt a thrill pass along her arm at the thought of it. That phrase is in the first question. I'm just going to read on a bit more because I haven't found out a lot of information. No wonder Manatiac was famous. Killing a bowhead was like killing a magical giant, a wonderful but also a terrible feat. The great life of the whale had ended, but a whole village had been saved. Okay, so I'm going to go back to question 1. What does "she felt a thrill pass along her arm" suggest about the character's emotions? So I'm going to find that. I'm going to skim and scan in the text, and I'm going to find that part. So it's here. She felt a thrill pass along her arm at the thought of it. Okay, so if we're thinking about that phrase, and if we're thinking about, if we're reading on killing a bowhead, the thrill, I think, could suggest that maybe she was excited, because if you're thrilled, that could be a synonym for being excited or overjoyed. So if we were answering that question, what does "she felt a thrill pass along her arm" suggest about the character's emotions? You could say something along the lines of she felt excited. There was a wave of excitement passing through her body. Okay, that's only one mark, so you don't need to elaborate too much. So number 2, clarify the phrase "his voice was swallowed up in the space between them." So I'm going to look out for that now. What was it like back then, she wondered, before houses and cars, TVs and donuts, when all you had was what you could hunt or make? If you made a mistake or weren't skillful enough, you would freeze or starve. Maybe Levi would have been happy in a time like that. Wildness might be a useful thing for a whale hunter. Noah was waving at her, shouting too by the look of him, but his voice was swallowed up in the space between them. There's that phrase. Clarify the phrase "his voice was swallowed up in the space between them." So I'm going to go back to that part. I'm going to skim and scan, and I know that it's here. His voice was swallowed up in the space between them. So I'm going to read that bit again. Noah was waving at her, shouting too by the look of it, but his voice was swallowed up by the space between them. So if I'm clarifying that, I need to explain what it means in different words. So shouting too by the look of him suggests that she can't actually hear what he's saying, because if someone was shouting, you can obviously see that their mouth is moving in quite an obvious way. But if you can't hear the sound, to me that suggests that they're quite far away. So if I'm clarifying that phrase, "his voice was swallowed up in the space between them," I would say maybe that they're standing far away, so that his voice cannot be heard. So his voice can't be heard. Okay, moving on to the next couple of questions. Trying to get rid of those lines. So we've got a couple more questions here. Find and copy a phrase that means the weather was unpredictable, 1 mark. And then moving on to a 2-mark question. How can you tell that the items on the sled were heavy? Use evidence from the text. So we'll spend a bit more time discussing that because it's 2 marks. So our first 1 mark question. Find and copy a phrase that means the weather was unpredictable. The icy mist caught in Suki's chest. I called and called, Noah said. You didn't come. I'm sorry. You need to pay attention when you're out here, Suki, Noah scolded. Nowadays, the weather is hard to read. It changes faster than it used to. Get up on the sled. We need to go. So if I'm looking at my question, I can see that I've got the word weather. And I know that in this sentence over here, if I skim and scan, I've also got the word weather. Nowadays, the weather is hard to read. So a phrase, you're not looking for a sentence. So you're looking for part of a sentence, maybe a few words that tell us the weather was unpredictable. So the words that I would choose there are, the weather is hard to read. The weather is hard to read, so you don't know what it's going to be like, which is the same as unpredictable. So that would give you your 1 mark. Going on to the second question, we're looking for information relating to telling that the items on the sled were heavy. So I'm going to read on. They set off at once. Everything was turned to dense, milky whiteness. Only the dogs closest to the sled were visible, their heads down, pulling hard. But were they going the right way? It was impossible to tell. A pulse of fear went through Suki's belly. She turned to her uncle and said, "I'm sorry, it's my fault, we're lost." Now, some key words in this question, sled and heavy. Now, I know here, if I skim and scan, there was sled. The dogs closest to the sled were visible. So how do we know that the sled was visible? So it says that the dogs' heads were down, they were pulling hard. And if you're pulling hard, it suggests that the sled was heavy, because if the things on the sled were light, then they wouldn't need to pull hard. So we can tell that the items on the sled were heavy by using evidence from the text, because it says that their heads were down and they were pulling hard. And these two phrases suggest that the things on the sled were heavy. Like I said, if you're pulling hard, then you're going to have some heavy objects in tow, in contrast to if it is light, where you would not be pulling hard. I'm going to erase these. And then there's 2 last questions to look at. So we're going to have a look at the questions again and identify that key information from the question, and then have a look at the text. So why would Suki be scared? Key word here, scared. We want to use evidence again from the text, 2 marks. And then find and copy a phrase that suggests that Suki was in a hurry to enter the house. So we're looking maybe for a word that means the same as hurry. The wind mostly blows from the northwest. It blows the snow into those shapes that point away from the wind, southeast, and that's where the village is. Suki felt that Noah had let her into a magical secret, that even in the heart of the frozen fog, the tongues of snow told them how to get home. All around, the fog washed and wafted as if they were floating in an eternal white bubble going nowhere. But Suki was no longer afraid. So we've got afraid here now. That means the same as scared. So I'm just going to underline that. The dog sniffed out the last bit of the route, turning a little to the right until they almost bumped into the side of the barn. The snowmobile was already safely stowed, so Jaku must be home with news of Levi. Suki leapt from the sled and rushed into the house. Okay, keyword house. Now I think I'm going to start with the second question here, because I just need to find and copy a phrase, and I think I found it. So that last sentence that I read, Suki leapt from the sled and rushed into the house. How do we know that she's in a hurry by looking at that sentence? Well, there's some key words here. She leapt, and it says she rushed, okay? So those 2 words, leapt and rushed, tell us that she was in a hurry. So you could use that phrase to answer that question. Leapt from the sled and rushed. That would answer number 2. Now, going back to why she could be scared, I'm going to look at this paragraph here, because this has the word of phrase. I'm going to read that again. And you might need to put yourself in the shoes of Suki to imagine why she could be scared here. Suki felt that Noah had let her into a magical secret, that even in the heart of the frozen fog, the tongues of snow told them how to get home. How to get home. So that might mean they're lost. Okay, that's a phrase that I might need. All around, the fog washed and wafted as if they were floating in an eternal white bubble going nowhere. But Suki was no longer afraid. Okay, so there's a couple of things there that I could use to help me with this. So we could say that Suki could be scared because she's lost. And we know that she's lost because the evidence from the text says, told them how to get home. So they're obviously not at home, so they're not in the comfort and the safety of their home. That's why she could be scared. And secondly, She may be scared because the fog washed and wafted all around them, so they can't really see. It's not very, it hasn't got good visibility, the environment at the moment. So they may be scared because of that as well, because they don't know where they are. And adding on to that, they also can't see where they're going either. So that might add to why she's scared. So I hope that's been helpful. You've got some questions in your pack for this week 11. So make sure you're looking at the questions, the marks available for the question, and make sure you're annotating the text as you go along, as you would do in George Spicer Reads, to pick out any key phrases and any important words that might help you to answer the questions. Looking forward to seeing your work.